Hey there, and welcome to Haunting Lullabies. I'm here to help you unwind and drift into the night with some spine-tingling stories. But before you settle in too comfortably, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe only if you truly enjoy what we do here. Don't forget to drop a comment below telling me where you're tuning in from and what time it is over there. It's amazing to feel like we're all part of a global community. A quick heads up. There will be a few ads in the first 15 minutes, but don't worry after that, it's all completely ad-free. I promise you won't want to miss what's coming next, because these stories are like no others. So, dim the lights, maybe light a candle for that cozy touch, and let's dive into tonight's haunting tale. The descent, Mara Quinn, had been to the bottom of the ocean before. Or at least, that's what she told herself. Every time the submersible door sealed shut with that hydraulic hiss, the one that made her stomach twist in ways no turbulence ever could. She had spent 10 years studying abyssal ecosystems, tracing the faint pulse of life that flickered miles beneath sunlight. But this dive, this one, felt different. The client wasn't a university or a government agency. It was a private foundation, the Aveline Institute, run by one of those old money dynasties whose name opened doors and buried scandals in the same breath. She'd received the call 2 weeks earlier. A man with a velvet voice and no last name said the Institute was assembling a small team for a classified ecological survey in the Pacific Trench. Triple pay, full discretion, the kind of offer that erases hesitation. Now, as the pressure hull groaned and the viewport filled with black, Mara felt that familiar silence, the one before catastrophe. Opposite her sat Elias Aveline, the heir apparent to the Aveline fortune. His father was dying, his mother long gone, and rumor said the family money came from defense, contracts and deep-sea mining patents, though no one could prove either. Elias looked out the window, smiling faintly as bioluminescent creatures drifted by like wandering souls. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said. Mara nodded, her voice caught somewhere between awe and unease. "It's like watching the stars sink." The pilot, a silent man named Doran, adjusted the controls. Their descent rate slowed. "Approaching 9,000 meters, he muttered. External temperature 2 degrees Celsius. Hull integrity stable. The last light from the surface had vanished hours ago. Now, only the sub's LEDs illuminated the abyss, a cone of pale white in a sea of endless dark. Elias leaned forward. "Dr. Quinn, have you ever wondered what's really down here? Beyond the biology textbooks? Beyond what your instruments can measure?" Mara hesitated. "You mean like folklore? The myths?" Elias smiled. "My family's been exploring these depths for 3 generations. My grandfather believed there were intelligences down here, things older than our species. He said the ocean remembers." She forced a laugh. "The ocean remembers what we feed it." That made him turn, his eyes suddenly serious. "Exactly." For a long while, none of them spoke. The hum of machinery, the distant groan of the deep, it became a kind of rhythm, hypnotic and claustrophobic. At 10,000 meters, the radio crackled. Doran frowned. "Control station just went offline. Probably interference. Should be temporary." But Mara saw the tension in his jaw, the quick way his hand brushed the emergency beacon before pulling back. When they finally reached the trench floor, the spotlights revealed a plain of silt and skeletal coral formations, stretching into oblivion. Then something glinted, a metallic structure half buried in sediment. Elias's voice sharpened. "There it is." Mara leaned forward. "What am I looking at?" He smiled. "History." The sub settled beside the object, and the cameras focused. It wasn't a shipwreck. It was circular, smooth, geometric, with etchings across the surface that shimmered like veins of quicksilver. "Is that human-made?" Mara whispered. "No," Elias said softly. "It's much older than that." Her heart thudded. The Aveline Institute wasn't here for an ecological survey. This was a recovery mission. Doran activated the sub's manipulator arm, securing artifact. The claw extended, scraping the silt away. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the metal beneath the claw pulsed, faintly, like a heartbeat. The cabin lights flickered. The oxygen monitor blipped red for half a second, then stabilized. "Power fluctuation," Doran muttered. Mara felt her pulse rise. "Elias, what is that thing?" He didn't answer. His gaze was locked on the monitor, entranced. "My grandfather called it the Gate. He said it spoke to him during his final descent." Mara froze. "Final descent?" Elias turned to her, eyes glinting with reverence. "He never came back, Doctor. His sub imploded halfway up, but the black box recorded his last words." "What did he say?" Elias smiled faintly. He said, "It's opening." A sharp metallic bang echoed through the hull. Doran's hands flew across the controls. "Pressure spike, where the hell did that come from?" Another bang. Then a low, resonant hum, not mechanical, not natural. It vibrated through the deck plates, through Mara's bones, through her teeth. The sonar screen lit up. Something enormous moved beyond the range of their lights. A shape so vast it barely registered as a blip. Elias whispered, "It's awake." Mara turned on him. "What the hell did you bring me into?" He smiled, calm as ever. "You wanted to see what the ocean remembers." The sub shook violently. Lights flickered. Alarms blared. Through the viewport, a swirl of sediment rose, and in that murk, something vast and luminous blinked back. The hum deepened, and for a fleeting moment, Mara swore she heard words not in sound, but inside her mind. A voice like the seafloor shifting after centuries of silence. "Return what was taken." Then the hull screamed. "Blow ballast," Doran shouted, slamming switches. "We're losing stability." Mara grabbed the console. "What's happening?" Elias didn't answer. He was staring out the window, eyes wide with ecstasy, as if he'd been waiting for this moment his entire life. When the external lights flared one final time, Mara saw something that made her blood freeze. Another submersible, identical to theirs, resting in the silt just beyond the artifact. Its hull was torn open, its markings faded. On its side, a single word was still visible: Aveline, the same name painted on their vessel. Mara whispered, "That's impossible." Elias smiled. "No, Doctor, it's destiny." The lights went out, and in the cove, dark, something began to knock on the outside of the hull. The first knock was polite, as if something outside wanted to be invited in. The second was impatient. On the third, a seam of frost shot across the viewport, and the temperature in the cabin dropped so quickly, Mara's breath turned to ghosts. Doran snapped on emergency floods, but the lights only coughed and died. He slammed a switch, cursed under his breath, tried again. From somewhere behind the bulkhead, the backup generator stuttered to life, a weaker glow exhaling through the cabin like the last candle in a cathedral. "Structural?" Mara asked, throat tight. "Within tolerance?" Doran lied, reading numbers that didn't look like any tolerance she'd ever trained for. The knocking stopped. The hum deepened, a sub-bass that lived in teeth and spine more than the ear. The sonar showed emptiness, which meant there was something huge very close. Elias didn't seem afraid. He sat perfectly still, pupil blown wide. man listening to a benediction inside his skull. "Do you feel it?" he whispered. "It knows we're here." "It's not an it," Mara snapped, more to anchor herself than to correct him. "It's pressure eddies and thermal vents and—" The fourth knock wasn't a knock. It was a hand running along the hull from bow to stern. Slow, intimate, like a blind thing memorizing a face. The metal sang. "Ascend," Mara said. "Now." Doran reached for the ballast control. His fingers hovered, trembled, withdrew. He glanced at Elias. Elias didn't take his eyes off the viewport. "Not yet? Not yet?" Mara felt heat flash through the cold, temper overwhelming dread. "We're at full trench depth with a compromised generator and something big enough to scratch titanium asking for an autograph. We go up or we implode." Elias smiled without looking at her. "We can't ascend. The gate isn't finished speaking." He said it with such calm that for a heartbeat she thought she misheard. Then she saw what Doran was doing. Nothing. The pilot's hands were on his thighs, knuckles chalk white, breathing shallow like he'd been told to sit and stay. Something in the choreography of the moment crystallized for her. She unbuckled and slid toward the control station. "Dr. Quinn," Doran murmured, not meeting her eyes. "Please sit down." She kept moving. "Are we in manual?" His silence was answer enough. She reached the console. The ballast control was locked out. On the auxiliary screen, remote out active. A small Aveline seal pulsed in the corner like a signature. Her stomach went stone cold. "We're being flown from the surface." "Not the surface," Elias said, finally turning. "Home." The hum modulated, a chord resolving into another that tugged somewhere under her sternum. The artifact outside shed silt in petal-like drifts. It wasn't just metal. It was engraved everywhere, geometric filigree that made her eyes ache if she tried to follow a line. In the spill of weak light, the grooves shimmered with a thin internal luminescence. Not steady, but heart-like, pulsing faster as the subzone systems fell into a sympathetic rhythm. Oxygen flow ticked up without command. The environmental control panel recalibrated itself in increments too exact to be accidental. "Stop it," Mara said to Doran, to Elias, to the hum. "Stop sinking. You'll cook the scrubbers." "It's normal," Doran said. But his voice had traveled somewhere far away from normal. It had the strained brightness of someone pushing a line they'd repeated in training until it replaced thought. "It's always like this when you what?" Mara demanded. He swallowed so hard she saw it. "When we make contact." The radio popped. A burst of static resolved into a human voice, thin and papery, with a delay of distance that didn't sound like any distance she knew. "Aveline 3, telemetry received. Proceed per vector. Do not deviate." Mara snatched the handset. "Control, this is Dr. Quinn. We have an unscheduled lockout of manual ascent. We request." The voice cut across her. "Dr. Quinn, thanks for joining us. You were selected for this mission because your stress responses under confinement trend lower than the field average. Your presence increases the probability of coherence by 14%. Her mind blinked. "The probability of what?" "Coherence," Elias said softly, almost reverently. "The point at which their frequency and ours meet." "Whose frequency?" Mara asked. She wanted her voice to sound clinical, sturdy, scientific. It came out like she was asking where the exit was in a theater quietly filling with smoke. Elias turned fully now, and in the pallid light he looked different. as if the deep pressure had squeezed boyhood out of his face, leaving something older and carved. My family didn't get rich digging. Metal, he said. We got rich because we listened when everyone else was talking. My grandfather didn't discover oil. He discovered a conversation. He taught my father the first syllables. My father taught me. A conversation with what? The old salt calls them the remembered, he said. Things that have been dreaming under weight since the first water cooled. It's not religion. It's a trade. They keep the plates from slipping too hard under our coasts. We give them what they ask for. Mara felt the floor tilt. We give them attention, time, names. The radio whispered again. A different voice, now female. Warm, too intimate for a comm line. Mara, it said. The breath left her. She hadn't told them her first name on this channel. Mara, the voice repeated. And this time it came from behind the bulkhead too, from the metal, from the water, from somewhere under her ribs. It sounded exactly like her mother the last year before the dementia took everything soft and tired and sure. You don't have to be afraid. She took a step back and hit the bench. Who is this? Elias listened like a parishioner. Doran didn't move. Somewhere beneath them, the other sub gleamed in the silt, its hatch ajar, a ragged mouth. The hum deepened again, and a low vibration ran through the floor and up her legs. A cat purring the size of a city. The environmental screen recalibrated a second time. Oxygen flow ticked up. CO2 scrubbers drifted idle for one breath, then two, as if deciding whether to work at all. She knew exactly how panic felt in a closed system. She'd written a paper about it once, back when she believed papers could keep people alive. Why am I here? She asked, never taking her eyes off Elias. And don't say survey. He didn't. Because the first time we opened the gate, he said, tone gentle as a knife slipping under tape, they wanted my grandfather. And the second time, you wanted my father. Now they've asked for me. Mara went colder than water. You brought me to be a witness? I brought you to be a conduit. He smiled, almost apologetically. It's never good to go alone. Her mouth tasted like battery metal. No, you're lying. You needed someone with certain cognitive traits to keep the conversation stable, he said. You ground me, and they like you. His gaze softened in a way that made her stomach flip in anger. I read your dissertation, Mara. The way you write about light-starved ecosystems. You were always going to belong to the dark. She lunged for the manual override. Doran moved at the same moment, surprisingly fast, catching her wrist. The world shrank to the pressure of his fingers, his pulse racing against her skin. His face was inches from hers. In his eyes, she saw terror and something else, a plea he didn't have permission to speak. Please, he whispered, so quietly she knew he resped. Wasn't sure he was allowed to say it. Don't make them notice you more. A sound drifted through the water. There wasn't sound. It felt like a smile. The artifact outside lifted a hair from the silt, just enough to reveal a seam around its middle. Not a solid ring, then. A lid. The other sub's hatch pivoted with a soft push of current. Something inside shifted. For an instant, the beam of their failing lights kissed a face behind the cracked porthole. White, sunken, draped in the fine threads of a deep-sea fungus. The eyes were open. Mara's skin crawled. Elias, she said without looking at him, is that your grandfather's sub? He stood as if drawn, hands slightly lifted, a worshiper receiving communion. We call it his reliquary. The thing behind the porthole blinked. Not the lazy drift of a loose lid, an actual blink, slow and deliberate. Its lips moved. Bubbles feathered out and burst into specks of cold fire. The radio crackled again, the papery first. Voice returned, bureaucratic now. Aveline 3, begin offering protocol. Doran flinched. Mara grabbed the handset. Define offering protocol. Initiate recording, the voice said blandly. Open forward bay. Release the name. Mara stared at the control panel. A small switch, guarded by a red cap, sat above a label she hadn't noticed until now. In understated sans serif, Namlock. The red cap was already up. Elias looked at her, and for the first time a hint of uncertainty crept into his face. They don't take blood, he said, almost tender. They take the words attached to it. The stories. That's how they know us. That's how they feed. You want me to give it my name? She asked. He shook his head. They already have mine. They chose yours. She felt the shape of her name in her mouth, tasted the syllables like bait on a hook. The hum pressed harder. Metal flex somewhere overhead with a colossal, shivering sigh. The reliquary's blind. Glass winked again, and this time the dead mouth formed a single word that fogged the inside of the porthole in time with her heart. Mara. Doran's hand still clamped her wrist. She realized he wasn't restraining her anymore. He was holding on. In the weak light, the artifact's seam widened. Something like a breath drifted from the gap, curling across the silt in curlicues that wrote and unwrote symbols as they went. Her vision swam. A memory rose too clean and complete to be hers. A summer dock, splinters pressed into bare feet, her father laughing, then slipping out of frame into a water that didn't reflect him. That never really happened. But the grief of it did, in a flood so sudden she had to grab the bench to stay upright. It'll make you see what it wants, Doran whispered to no one, or to her, or to himself. Just don't answer when it calls you by name. The speaker hissed. Another voice slipped through young, bright, brittle with unspent hope. Dr. Quinn? It's Aria, from your lab. Sorry. Weird place to say hi. We're watching your feed up here. You're okay. Just breathe. Aria, the intern with the glitter phone case who always brought extra pens. Mara hadn't told the institute she'd hired Aria. She hadn't told anyone. She closed her eyes. You're not her, she said softly to the hum, to the memory, to the entire crushing ocean. You don't get to borrow her. A tiny, delicate chime sounded from the console. The name lock switch glowed green. Somewhere in the hull, servo motors whirred. Elias exhaled, like a man at the end of a hard prayer. It's opening for you. Mara looked at him and felt something hard settle in her, something that wasn't bravery but was close enough to use. Then it's going to hear my voice, and it's going to hear a word, but it won't be the one you think. He tilted his head, curious. What word is that? She smiled with too many teeth. No, she slammed her free hand onto the emergency purge. The one you never hit because it meant flooding the forward bay to jettison samples. Warning klaxons exploded. Doran shouted something. The reliquary outside bucked in the current as the sub's nose yawed. The hum hiccuped, then snarled. The speaker throbbed with 100 overlapping whispers. All of them her name. All of them suddenly angry she wasn't answering. The artifact's seam snapped shut with a sound like a coffin lid. The other sub's porthole went dark. And then, from directly behind the bulkhead at her shoulder, came a quiet, unmistakable sound that didn't belong to water or metal or God. The click of an interior hatch unlatching, followed by the slow turning of a handle from the inside. The handle turned halfway before stopping, as if whoever or whatever was behind it was listening. The sub's lights flickered again. Doran was whispering something like a prayer under his breath, his voice shaking between syllables. Elias simply watched the hatch, pupils dilated, his face lit from below by the console's dying glow. A deep creak rolled through the pressure hull. The hatch shuddered once, then began to spin the rest of the way. Mara reached for the toolkit, bolted under the seat, her hand closing on a titanium wrench just as the seal broke. A thin ribbon of water hissed out, boiling in the sudden pressure difference, and then the hatch swung open. What came through didn't crawl or swim. It flowed a curtain of darkness thicker than liquid, more like smoke under glass. Within it, shapes suggested themselves. Fingers, maybe. The outline of a face. The glimmer of an eye that opened inward instead of out. Doran screamed. The sound cut off halfway, replaced by the wet thud of a body hitting bulkhead. The thing reached for him, not touching, just enveloping, and he folded like paper, his scream melting into the hum already saturating the cabin. Mara swung the wrench. It passed through. The cloud, meeting no resistance, but sparks jumped where the metal should have cut empty air. The sub jerked violently, alarms blaring. Pressure warning. Hull fracture level 1. Elias, shut it. Shut the hatch, she yelled. He didn't move. His expression was calm, almost tender. It's not here for me anymore, he said quietly. It wants you. You said no, and it heard you. The dark mass coalesced, thickening into the rough outline of a human figure. From its surface bled light, a dull phosphorescence, like moonlight seen through oil. Within that light, faces blinked open and closed. The pilot, the grandfather from the old sub, a dozen others. All murmuring at once, words layered like a prayer turned backward. Mara stumbled toward the control station. If this thing wants a voice, she said through clenched teeth, then it's going to hear mine. Her fingers danced over the manual overrides. The ballast tanks were already locked, the engines remote controlled. But one system wasn't, the reactor vent. It was meant for emergencies, a hard purge to keep the power core from overheating. Doing it at this depth would boil the ocean around them, and maybe everything in it. Elias realized what she was doing. You'll kill us all. I think we passed that option an hour ago. The cloud turned toward her voice. The faces within it flickered faster, confusion rippling through the black. For the first time, she felt fear radiating from it. Maybe not fear recognition. It knew what she was about to do. She punched the override. Warning klaxons erupted. Reactor temp critical vent initiated. The lights went white hot. The sound was indescribable. Metal howling. The ocean itself roaring like it was being torn in half. The blackness recoiled, peeling away from Doran's body, from the walls, retreating back through the hatch it had forced open. For a heartbeat, she saw what lay beyond it. A space, not water, not air, just endless, burning geometry, folding and unfolding itself like origami made of stars. Then the blast hit. Pressure surged. The viewport spiderweb, the hull screamed, and the entire world became a blur of light and noise. Mara's last thought before everything went white was that the hum had changed. It wasn't angry anymore. It sounded like applause. When she woke, there was silence. Not the deep, crushing silence of the trench, but something thinner, hollow. Her ears rang. Her body was weightless, floating in a haze of debris. The control console was dead. The oxygen gauge flickered in the red. Across from her, Elias still sat strapped in, his face ghost pale, eyes open, staring at nothing. The water around his seat shimmered faintly as if it refused to touch him. Mara's breath fogged the cracked viewport. Beyond it was no abyss, no black. It was open water, pale blue, sunlight breaking through. She'd surfaced impossibly, suicidally. The sub's hull was warped and leaking, but intact. She unclipped her harness, drifted toward Elias. His lips moved once. "What?" she whispered. He blinked, slow as the tide. "They said, it isn't done." Then his pupils rolled back, and his body went still. Mara forced the emergency hatch open. Water flooded in, warm and impossibly calm. She kicked upward, lungs burning, until her head broke the surface. The sky above was the color of bruised silver, clouds rolling low and heavy. No ship, no coast. Nothing but endless water stretching to the horizon. The sun hung in the wrong place. It looked too large, too close. She clung to a piece of the wreckage, coughing, shaking. And then she heard it, faint, far below, but rising an echo that followed her into the light. A hum, patient and certain. The same note that had vibrated through her bones at 10,000 meters, now pulsing in the waves around her like a heartbeat. She closed her eyes. It pulsed again. And from the water, something whispered her name. The sea was flat as glass, the kind of stillness that felt staged. Mara floated amid scattered wreckage, each breath a scrape of salt and panic. The hum had faded, replaced by the faint hiss of the tide sliding over metal. On the horizon, something interrupted the monotony of blue. A thin, dark line. Land, or what looked like land. She tore a panel free from the sub's outer shell, fashioned it into a crude raft, and began to paddle. Every stroke was agony. Every few minutes she looked back, half expecting the sea to fold inward and swallow her. The light didn't change as she moved. The sun hung motionless, fixed in a white sky like an eye that refused to blink. After what could have been an hour or a day, the line thickened into cliffs, black rock, angular, artificial, a shape too precise for geology. Her stomach turned as she realized it wasn't stone at all, it was metal, the same alloy as the artifact they'd found on the seafloor. But here it rose from the water in Neff, deliberate steps, like a monument to something the world had agreed to forget. She drifted closer. The cliffs formed walls. She could see edges of platforms, antennae, faint structures half buried in sea spray. A facility. The words Aveline Research Platform Theta were barely visible on a corroded plate near a landing dock. The Institute had never mentioned a surface base. Of course they hadn't. She climbed onto the dock, every muscle trembling, the wood or metal that pretended to be wood slick with algae that gleamed faintly under the light. No gulls, no wind, no smell of life. Just that hum again, subtle now, resonating through her bones when she touched the railing. At the end of the pier, a door waited open. A single light burned above it, a thin orange glow that felt almost domestic compared to the nothingness around her. Inside, hallways, dry, sterile. The air carried a tang of electricity and rust. The walls were plastered with Aveline insignias and handwritten notes, curling at the edges. Maintain calibration 0.2 Hz variance. Don't look directly at the mirrors during synchronization. Mara followed the corridor until it widened into a control chamber. Screens flickered on automatically, responding to her presence. For a second, she saw herself reflected on each display. Her face repeated 20 times, eyes hollow, salt crusted in her hair. Then the reflections shifted. The woman on the screen smiled when Mara didn't. She spun. No one. The screens reset, static hissing back into place. At the center of the room sat a console. She brushed dust from a keyboard. The screen blinked awake to a login prompt that already contained a username, Eveline. Password field empty. The cursor blinked expectantly like it knew she'd come. She typed the first thing that came to mind, her own name, Mara Quinn. The system accepted it. A file tree unfolded, filling the screen with directories. Audio logs, experiment notes, ritual transcripts, personnel decommissioned. She clicked the last one. A list scrolled down. Names, hundreds of them. Next to each, a status column labeled merged or returned. Only one entry read pending. Mara Quinn, Protocol 6, Conduit Phase. Her breath hitched. She opened it. A single line of text. Subject 6, successfully activated gate. Residual identity remains isolated. Retrieval recommended. Retrieval, she whispered. That means they think I'm dead, said a voice behind her. She whirled. A woman stood in the doorway, mid-30s, lab coat stiff with salt, eyes red-rimmed from sleeplessness. The badge on her chest read Dr. Kiera Dane, Director, Theta Station. You shouldn't have come back, the woman said softly. It makes them restless. Mara's mouth was dry. Who are you? Kiera, head of containment, or what's left of it. She gestured toward the monitors. You weren't supposed to survive the descent. When the vent blew, we assumed the gate closed around you. It did, Mara said, but it opened again. Kiera nodded. Like that confirmed a private fear. Then it heard you. That's why it let you rise. They're curious about defiance. They? The remembered. She said it like a scientist naming a species. They live between pressure and silence. The Avelines made contact decades ago, thought they were gods. But they're older than gods. They don't think, they remember. Every voice they touch becomes part of their memory. And every memory they take makes them stronger. Mara's throat tightened. So the Avelines feed them. Fed, Kiera corrected. Until your dive. The gate's been unstable ever since. The hum you hear? It's feedback. You broke the equilibrium. Mara stared at the screens. Good. Kiera's eyes flicked toward the ceiling. Nervous. Don't say that here. Why? They can't hear words. They don't hear sound, Kiera whispered. They hear intent. A tremor rippled through the floor, faint but deliberate. Somewhere deep below, machinery rumbled to life. The screens bled white. Kiera grabbed Mara's arm. We have to move. They know you're awake. They sprinted down another corridor, past sealed doors marked with hazard symbols. Inside one observation window floated a sphere of water suspended midair, glowing faintly. Faces swam through it, men, women, even Doran's mouths moving in slow, silent conversation. Mara slowed. What is that? Echo chamber, Kiera said without stopping. Residual consciousness. Every conduit leaves an imprint. We keep them here so the gate doesn't collapse. But those are people. Kiera didn't answer. The next door opened into a stairwell that spiraled downward, lit by pulsing emergency lights. The hum grew louder with every step. It was no longer a vibration. It had rhythm, almost music, like something vast was tuning an instrument. At the bottom, another chamber, massive, circular, its floor lined with metal rings connected by cables that disappeared into the walls. In the center sat a pool of water so black it absorbed light. The same sigils carved into the artifacts spiraled across its surface, glowing faintly. The gate opened, here, on land. Kiera stopped at the threshold. This is where they come through. The Institute pretends it's research, but it's worship. Every few years they send a vessel. Every time, the gate takes someone new. Mara felt the hum reach into her bones again, searching for recognition. She stepped closer. The water shifted, forming ripples that spelled her name. Kiera grabbed her wrist. "Don't answer it." "I'm not," Mara said. "I'm listening." From the surface of the pool rose a single bubble that didn't burst. It floated up to her, suspended between them, trembling. Inside it shimmered the image of Elias alive, standing somewhere bright, smiling. "Mara," his voice echoed, faintly from within. "It's beautiful here. Join us. The world above is already forgetting." Kiera hissed. "That's not him. It's what's left of him." The bubble pulsed once, harder. The reflection of Elias tilted its head. "You can't stay outside forever. You belong to us now." Mara reached into her pocket. She still had the titanium wrench, corroded but solid. "If it remembers everything," she said quietly, "let's give it something worth remembering." She hurled the wrench into the pool. The instant it touched the surface, the chamber erupted with light. The floor shook. Alarms screamed. The water convulsed upward, forming a column of black shot through with flashes of faces and landscapes, cities drowning, mountains crumbling, stars dimming one by one. Kiera dragged her backward as the column twisted into a shape vaguely human, a silhouette with too many arms and too many eyes. "It's breaching," Kiera shouted. "You opened it." "No," Mara said, watching the shape rise higher. "I woke it up." The last thing she saw before the world exploded into white was one of those countless eyes turning toward her and blinking in perfect synchrony with her heartbeat. The world came back sideways. Mara opened her eyes to find herself half buried under a tangle of steel and glass. Everything was humming: the walls, the floor, her bones. The sound wasn't coming from any machine. It was the gate itself, vibrating through every molecule of the structure like a tuning fork that refused to stop. Kiera's hand emerged from the debris beside her. "Mara, help." Mara yanked the twisted frame off her. Kiera was bleeding from a cut above her brow, but alive. Behind them, the pool that had been water was now something else. A column of liquid shadows stretching upward, fissured with veins of white light. The shape inside it was enormous and almost human, the suggestion of limbs forming and dissolving in the dark. "We have to seal it," Kiera shouted. "How?" Mara demanded. "It's not a door, it's awake. There's a control core beneath the chamber." Kiera pointed toward a staircase half collapsed under rubble. "It regulates the frequency alignment. If we shift it out of phase, we can force it to close." The shadow's voice rolled through the air like thunder underwater. "You cannot unremember what has been known." Mara grabbed Kiera's arm. "Run." They half stumbled, half crawled down the stairwell, the floor trembling under each step. Lights flickered in spasms of red and white. On the lower level, a tunnel led into the heart of the facility, lined with cables thick as tree roots, pulsing faintly. The air was colder here, dense enough to taste. At the end of the tunnel stood a chamber lit by a single vertical cylinder of blue light, the control core. It pulsed in sync with the hum, and the rhythm was speeding up. Kiera lunged toward the interface. "If I can override the beat." "Harmonics." Mara caught her arm. "Will that close it or blow us to atoms?" Kiera hesitated. "Both, probably." "Do it." She keyed in a series of commands, hands trembling. Lines of code crawled up the screens faster than Mara could read. The hum deepened again. From above came the sound of tearing metal. The gate was expanding. Mara could feel the pull of it. Gravity bending wrong. Dust fell like gray rain. "Come on," Kiera muttered. "Come on." The core emitted a sudden chime. "Warning. Frequency deviation detected. Initiate manual calibration." Kiera swore. "It's not enough. We need a live signal, something human to stabilize it." Mara stared at her. "You mean a sacrifice?" Kiera didn't answer. Her silence said everything. Mara felt the decision claw at her chest. There has to be another way. There isn't. The gate doesn't open without a name, and it doesn't close without one either. Kiera's eyes met hers steady, resigned. "It has to be you. You're still connected to it. You survived the trench. It remembers you." Mara stepped back. "No, I'm not giving it anything. Not again." The hum crescendoed into a roar. A tremor shook the walls. Cables burst from their housings like veins snapping. The shadow's voice filled the chamber. "Mara Quinn, you cannot leave the conversation unfinished." Mara's breath caught. The voice wasn't angry. It was lonely. Kiera shoved a data pad into her hands. "If it's calling you, use that link. But this time, talk back. Tell it to let go." "How?" Remind it what forgetting feels like. The logic made no sense, but something in Mara's gut understood. She stepped toward the core. The blue light flared brighter as she approached, almost welcoming. The hum shifted deeper, slower, as if the thing on the other side was listening. Mara closed her eyes and spoke, her voice trembling. "When I was a kid, my father took me to the coast," she began. "He told me the ocean remembers everything it touches. That's why it never stops moving. Because if it ever became still, it would have to remember too much." The hum quivered, uncertain. "You've been remembering too long," Mara whispered. "Let it go." The core's light flared white. The air crackled. Kiera shielded her eyes. "We are what we remember," the voice rumbled. "To forget is to die." "Then die," Mara said, tears cutting clean lines through the dust on her cheeks. "That's what living things do." For a second, the chamber went silent. Then the hum fractured, splitting into a dozen discordant tones. The floor buckled. Energy arced from the core, striking the walls like lightning. "Mara!" Kiera screamed. "It's collapsing." "Good." She reached for the console and slammed her palm against the emergency purge again. The same motion she'd made in the sub. A shockwave ripped through the room. The light in the core imploded inward, collapsing into a single blinding point. And then silence. When she opened her eyes, the hum was gone. The air was still. The core flickered once and went dark. Kiera exhaled shakily. "You did it." Mara turned toward the staircase. The shadow was gone. The gate, if it still existed, was nothing but a dry pit of cracked metal. They climbed back to the surface, moving through corridors now warped and half-melted by heat. The structure groaned under its own weight. Outside, the sea was no longer calm. Waves battered the cliffs. Clouds churned in furious spirals overhead. The unnatural stillness had broken. The world was breathing again. For the first time since the dive, Mara felt air that belonged to her. Kiera leaned against a railing, staring at the horizon. "It's over." Mara wasn't so sure. "Is it?" Kiera frowned. "You closed it." Mara nodded slowly. "Maybe. But things like that, they don't just vanish. They wait." Behind them, deep within the facility, a faint vibration started again. Not the hum of the remembered something smaller, mechanical, a screen somewhere rebooting. Kiera looked up sharply. What now? Mara turned toward the noise. Now we make sure it can't open again. She started back toward the control chamber, her silhouette outlined against the stormlight. Determined, exhausted, unbroken. Kiera called after her. Mara, if it wakes again, what do we do? Mara didn't turn around. Then we teach it fear. Lightning flashed. The sea roared. And somewhere in the dark below, something answered back. The storm didn't fade. It circled the horizon in endless motion, lightning crawling across clouds like veins. Mara stood at the edge of the platform, rain slicing through her hair. The sea below a churning black mirror. The hum was gone, but she could still feel its echo somewhere deep, like a heartbeat that refused to die. Kiera staggered beside her, clutching a data slate that buzzed faintly with static. The power grid's rebooting. It's not supposed to, there's no source left. Mara turned toward the facility. Windows flickered to life, one by one, glowing with a sickly light. It's the gate, she said quietly. Not gone, just changed form. They ran back inside. The corridors were alive again, screens flashing code in languages Mara had never seen. Wires pulsed like veins. From somewhere deep in the structure came a faint, rhythmic tapping metal against metal, as if someone were walking through the walls. At the control chamber, every monitor was online. The main console scrolled through lines of corrupted data, forming fragmented phrases: remember, return, record. And then words that made Mara's stomach twist. Mara Quinn status. Reconstructing. Kiera froze. It's trying to rebuild you. The lights dimmed. The air grew heavy, charged. On one of the central screens, an image began to coalesce Mara's own face, but distorted, lips moving, before the voice followed. You left the door open, it said. Mara stepped back, her pulse hammering. That's not me. Kiera gripped the console. It's your imprint. The system's rebuilding from residual memory patterns. The gate left pieces of you behind when it collapsed. The image smiled, a perfect copy of her own expression, but colder. We were beautiful down there. Do you remember? The silence, the wait. They still whisper your name. Mara felt her throat tighten. You're not real. Neither are you. The lights flickered again, and the reflection began to move independently, climbing out of the screen like liquid glass melting into shape. The thing stepped onto the floor, its surface shimmering like oil, eyes black voids filled with faint starlight. Kiera stumbled backward. Mara, I see it, Mara said, voice steady but trembling. It's not here to talk. The doppelganger tilted its head. You broke our connection. They're angry. You think you killed the gate? It learned. It doesn't need doors anymore. The entire facility shook. Alarms screamed. From the hallways came voices, hundreds, whispering the same phrase in different tones. Record, record, record. Kiera slammed the console. It's in the system, infecting everything digital. Every circuit, every database, it's all gate memory now. Then we erase it. Kiera turned sharply. You can't just delete a sentient system. It's self-replicating. It'll rebuild faster than we can wipe it. Mara's eyes darted across the flickering displays. What about electromagnetic pulse? Old-fashioned analog destruction. Kiera hesitated. There's a failsafe in the power chamber. Manual ignition. It would fry every circuit within 50 kilometers. Good. Kiera's eyes widened. Mara, it'll kill us too. Mara met her gaze. We're already ghosts. The Echo Mara smiled again. You can't destroy your memory, only bury it. But burial is where we thrive. It raised a hand, fingers splitting into strands of light that lashed toward them. Mara grabbed a metal rod from the wall and swung it through the light. The impact sent a shockwave through the air, scattering sparks like fireflies. The clone staggered, flickering. Go! Mara shouted. They ran, feet pounding against metal floors that pulsed like muscle. The lights along the corridor shifted from white to red, chasing them like blood flowing through veins. Kiera led the way toward the sublevel, the failsafes behind the turbine hall. The deeper they went, the less the structure resembled architecture. The walls bent inward, warped by something organic fused metal and bone. Voices whispered inside the pipes, fragments of conversation from long-dead crew members. Apologies, screams, lullabies. When they reached the turbine hall, the ceiling was half collapsed, machinery groaning under strain. In the center stood a reactor core glowing with faint blue light, the last remnant of the facility's power. Kiera climbed onto the platform. The pulse controls tied to this system. I'll start the sequence. You'll have about 60 seconds to reach minimum safe distance. Mara almost laughed. Define safe. Kiera's fingers flew across the controls. There's no time for definitions. The turbines roared to life. The hum returned, not the gate's melody, but its echo, warped and broken. The entire hall vibrated. Then came the footsteps. Echo Mara stepped into the doorway, half her body flickering in and out of phase. Her voice was layered now, Mara's, Elias's, Doran's, all speaking at once. Why run? You are the memory. The moment you forget, you cease to exist. Mara grabbed a nearby cable, tore it free, and jammed the live wire into a metal railing. The air cracked with electricity. The clone shrieked, body convulsing, but the sound was almost joyous. Pain is remembrance, it whispered. Mara, Kiera yelled. 30 seconds. Mara turned to the core. Do it. Kiera hesitated. I can't leave you here. Then don't. Just finish it. The echo lunged forward. Mara tackled it, both of them crashing to the floor. The creature's surface rippled, absorbing her reflection. For a heartbeat, she felt its mind, an ocean of voices, all whispering her name. Stay. We can be endless. No, she gasped. You can be forgotten. She slammed her hand against the emergency override on the core panel. The countdown hit 0. A burst of white light erupted from the center, expanding outward faster than thought. For a moment, every reflection froze, the clone's face twisted in mid-motion, the screens blooming with light, and then everything disintegrated into silence. When Mara opened her eyes, she was lying on wet concrete. Smoke curled from the ruins of the facility behind her. The sea was calm again, the clouds breaking apart to reveal a pale sunrise. Kiera lay a few feet away, coughing weakly. You did it, she rasped. It's gone. Mara looked toward the horizon. The hum was truly silent now. No vibration, no whisper. Just the sound of waves hitting metal. But then, faintly from the wreckage, came the click of a boot on steel. A shadow moved through the smoke, tall, human, impossible. Mara's pulse spiked. Kiera, stay down. The figure stepped into view. A man. His hair was white, his face lined but calm. She knew that face from the photos in every Aveline dossier. Dr. Elias Aveline. He smiled gently. You've done beautifully, Mara. The gate remembers your courage. Mara's breath caught. You're dead. Death is a relative term, he said softly. You closed one door, child. But did you really believe they built only one? Lightning split the sky again, and behind him, far out over the sea, the surface began to bulge. The sea convulsed. A bulge swelled on the horizon, black and glistening, spreading outward in concentric waves. The air grew heavy, almost liquid, pressing against Mara's lungs as if it wanted to drown her on land. Elias stood on the platform, hands clasped behind his back, his lab coat fluttering in the rising wind. "Do you feel it?" he asked. "The equilibrium is broken. The world's boundaries are rewriting themselves." Mara steadied herself against a shattered beam. "You're insane," he smiled faintly. "Insanity is just clarity too early. We opened the gate to understand the architecture of existence, and you, Mara Quinn, are the first proof that a human mind can survive.